All right, and welcome back to 40 Days of Letting Go. I have with me the wonderful Chris Jackson. Thank you so much for being here. And today our topic is living mindfully in the present. This is our last week, actually, of 40 Days of Letting Go series, which is amazing because I couldn't believe that one, time went by that fast, but two, we actually covered so many things within like 30 some odd days. So
Right.
this is amazing. But before we get into it, I would love to just go into prayer for a quick second. All right, Father God, thank you so much for another episode. Thank you for bringing us this far in the 40 Days of Letting Go series. Thank you so much for Chris and his wealth of information and knowledge and wisdom that he's willing to present today, Father God. We just ask that you lead our discussion and that you provide your wisdom and your grace and your mercy. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Awesome. So you have an extensive resume, right? But
Appreciate that.
Chris Jackson, you are the assistant executive director for the Opportunity League and co-founder, right? And I've read your bio, and your journey towards mindfulness is amazing. Can you tell us a bit about that and about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, first off, I'd like to thank you, Rochelle, for the opportunity of being here, going through this. And I applaud you for taking on the challenge of doing this for 40 great episodes. And it seems though that it's been a great journey for you and it's been a good experience. And I'm sure your audience really appreciates that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey starts off as really a shy and introspective child. So I really kept to myself. I was very reserved, but in that I did find solace in solitude, but also within sports.
Mm.
And so I found that I was able to express myself with and find my voice really through sports. And that really helped me to get through my adolescence. And then it wasn't until my mid-20s when I really dove into communications and understanding how it is so impactful for human connection. And so that really has paved the way as far as my journey and understanding how to be in the present mind. I identified from being in sports, how you have to be present in order to try to do your best. Because if you were distracted, if you were not in the present moment, then you don't succeed. You don't do well, right? So, so yeah, and then also I've been in information technology for over two decades.
Awesome.
And I've also, which inspired me, all these things have built up to be a mentor and community engagement for the over past 15 years by co-founding, as you mentioned, the Opportunity League.
Wow. Amazing. What kind of drove you to sports and even engaging with the community? Like what drove you to that?
So sports was my outlet. That was the way that I was able to, as I said, express myself, have a means of just, you can go as hard as you can within sports and really just let go. And I was, everyone has their own type of childhood, and mine had a lot of ups and downs. And when you were on that field, on that court, whatever the case may be, playing that sport, you're just in that present moment. You are there. That is the purpose, is to swing and hit that ball, to make that good throw, to make that shot, make that good pass,
Absolutely.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And then that's where I found a lot of joy in that. And I found that going to various different places, funny enough, is like boys and girls clubs and YMCA's, where
Mhm.
there was a lot of that. And it was encouraged. And so I think that is the piece that really sparked my appreciation of community, a place to
Nice.
go. And so that's where these two things have merged together.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So in order to be mindful, and
There we go.
as I mentioned, I realized in my 20s, my verbal communication, my written communication was horrific just because I neglected it. And now I've put some effort into it. I realized the importance of doing that. And so, excuse me, as I continue to realize the importance of communication, I wanted to lay the groundwork for this, for us to understand how to be present. And I think it's important for us to have definitions. So
Absolutely.
let's define what is the past. The past
Mhm.
represents our history, right?
Mhm.
The experiences that have shaped us, like of who we are, they don't necessarily define us, but that's have shaped who we are.
Right.
But they're now no longer tangible. We can't touch them, right?
Mm.
And then on the other hand, there's the future. The
Right.
future is the realm of possibilities. That's where aspirations and dreams reside.
Right.
And then we could come to the present. The present is where it's the here and now. It's the holds the power to shape our reality. It is where the opportunity, we can take the opportunity and make choices and create the future that we desire. So that I think it's important for us to have a good grip of all these things as we go through the journey of understanding how to be more present. I think it's
Absolutely.
really important.
Wow. And that's in the beginning, it's so hard to do if it hasn't been made a habit to be present and to be aware. I think when I first
Sure.
started doing therapy, I would talk to so my business is called Mindful Living. So I would talk to my clients about being mindful, and I was the least mindful person. And it was like, practice meditation, stay grounded. And I'm like,
Mhm.
when I would practice, when I
Yeah.
started 2020 and 21, I couldn't do it. It was like these intrusive thoughts would come in, and it's like,
Mm.
wow, so it has to be a habit. You have to kind of cultivate that habit of mindfulness, to be aware, right, and to be conscious. So I think making it a habit, and it sounds like from in your journey, you've made it a habit in your
No
in your
question.
lifestyle.
There's no question about it. There's no
Wow.
question about it. And I got 7 tips, 7 steps that help us. And
Yes.
a habit is one of them. It goes into one of them. So
Nice, nice,
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Well, I'm taking notes, so please go ahead with
Yeah,
your
let's
7.
go. Let's go through the steps,
Let's do
right?
it.
7 days in a week, 7 steps. Come on, we can
Yes,
do it, right?
I
So
love it.
I think the first one, I think most people would under clearly easily understand, and it probably have attempted to do this, and it's this one of the easier ones, and it's eliminate distractions or minimize distractions, right? We know that
Mhm.
we could at least try to minimize distractions. Distractions erode or take away from our present mind. So, but
Absolutely.
it's so important, right? So we have to try to make sure that we try to eliminate distractions as much as we possibly can.
Okay.
Step number two is create routines. So how many times have we driven home and we forgot to drive? It's a routine, it's a routine. Exactly. So how many
Uh-huh.
times you get up, you go through your morning routine or your bedtime routine. And if you don't have one, you should probably get one, right? You should
Yeah,
try to
yeah, yeah.
have, those routines, because then it does become habit.
Yes.
It's something that you don't necessarily have to do consciously. You don't have to make those type of decisions consciously. They just
Right.
happen because
Right.
it is now a habit, right?
Right.
Number three, I'm sorry, is journaling. So it could be audio journaling, it could be video, it could be just writing things down, it could be typing things down, whatever the case may be. But journal,
Absolutely.
it has been um, something that I was very reluctant in doing, but I have
Hmm.
found a lot has come from it. So I
Absolutely.
definitely make sure I try to journal. Number
Absolutely.
four is reflection. So as you journal, you can then reflect on what has happened
Hmm.
and say if you had to go through that scenario, whatever the case may be, again, what would you
Hmm.
have done different?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? And then number five is celebrate the win. Celebrate where you did a good job in a situation, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
Celebrate that you have acknowledged that situation, even.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of people, I think we as humans have lost or have not done a good enough job of acknowledging where we are. I think that's a big key
Absolutely.
that people just miss out on.
Right.
Yeah. And then number six is being positive. So having a positive mindset um, it is very important in
Absolutely.
because if you are negative, it goes into number seven, have negative thoughts. It goes into something that this is an old one, but good. But Dr. Maxwell Maltz talks about a variety of different things, but goes into a snapback effect.
Mm.
So that is like a regression of old habits.
Right. Wow.
So
Yeah.
I have a prop, so a rubber band.
Uh-huh.
And so the way I envision it, he gets into a lot of different things, but the way I envision it is we are in our present mind. So if you hold a rubber band between your two thumbs, you're in your present mind here. And then as you try to go through your journey and you try to do more, hey, I want to go to the gym. I want to
Right.
eat healthy. I want to
Right.
do all these good
Right.
habits, right?
Right.
But there's a couple components that if they don't line up, you just snap back. You
Wow.
snap back to where you started.
Yeah.
So that's where people regress back to their old habits of
Yeah.
not eating healthy and not going to the gym and all that stuff. So, and
I
there's
love
a
that.
there's a couple components that go into that. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. And even learning about mindfulness, in the journey of it, I've learned that the word mindfulness is so broad. And so there's
It is.
like other subsets of it, right? Categories: mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful commuting. Like we were just talking about, how often have
Mhm.
we driven
Right.
somewhere? So many times it's like airplane mode. It's like, how did I get here? I know I had to get into a car some way, but we do it so often
Right.
and it's just like, automatic. Mindful coloring, meditation, things like that. I love those steps that you named. And then also, I would say, going with not only celebrating the wins and reflection, but have a beginner's mindset, I guess you could say, um, in a way where we are not harsh with ourselves or harsh with anybody else or harsh with situations. I guess that's where radical acceptance would come in, where
Mm,
you have that beginner's mindset where you're not assuming or expecting in such a way where there's so much judgment, because I think judgment creates this suffering, right, where in our minds, as adults especially, we have an idea of how things should go, or
mm,
what, or how people should be to some degree. And
right.
once we kind of get rid of the extreme judgment, it's a little freeing. It becomes
Mm,
so much more free to experience that load off your shoulders. Because I think that's where, when we have judgments of situations and we have judgments of people, and then we have these expectations, And so now it's hard to be mindful because now we're not fully in the present and we can't appreciate too much of anything.
No question.
So,
There's no
yeah,
question about it.
absolutely.
There's no
Yeah, so
question.
having that beginner, and that's hard, especially as an adult. I think, and that's like coming into a situation kind of like in a childlike way, but in a more a childlike way that's a lot more precious, where it's like, I want to learn more. I want to explore more. I don't want to judge the situation because this is new to me. So
Right.
coming to a situation in that new way of thinking, it does create mindfulness, but that takes practice though.
There's no question about it. There's no question about it.
Yes.
I have, as I mentioned before, I have an IT, information technology background,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of techniques, a lot of trainings out there, and one of them is continuous learning or
Hmm.
continuous improvement, right? And
Hmm.
so, I think when you say that childlike mentality, you go back to a point that we made earlier about acknowledgement.
Hmm. Hmm.
Truly acknowledge where you are,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So truly acknowledge where you are
Yeah.
and be okay with it. And if that is that, if you have to give yourself the thought that, hey, I'm going to
I
approach
like
this
that.
in a childlike manner,
Right.
because I'm either ignorant to it or whatever the case may be, I'm very new to it. It's very
Hmm.
novel for me. Then
Yeah.
let me go ahead and do that. And then it does take the burden off of, hey, do I need to be an expert at this? Do I need to uh, have the ability to go through this
Hmm.
process, whatever I'm trying to do, in an
Right.
expert manner? And the answer is
Right.
no,
Wow.
right? Yeah.
Wow.
So
I love
I'm
that.
right with you. I'm right with you.
I love that because it kind of, it to some degree, it helps you to get rid of that ego a little bit.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's exactly it. I have learned to let that go as much as I possibly can.
Yes.
It is just, it is such a part of our human um our human mind
Hmm.
is such a hindrance. It really does. It
Yes,
just holds us back
it does.
tremendously. It really does. If we can acknowledge who we are and say, this is where I'm at, and I'm willing to face whatever obstacles of my own self and also
Mhm.
around me in
Yes.
a childlike manner, and
Yeah.
say, I'm going to just address this the best I can.
Yeah.
And if I fail or if I succeed, I'm still going to learn from that.
Wow. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And that it helps you, it helps to ground you. I think what you said about being honest about where you are. How often, do we I know me, I remember starting any class that I start or anything I start, I have this bad habit of when I get like a syllabus or like direction of what I'm supposed to do, I get this bad habit of saying to myself, I'm going to do this so perfect. It's going to be great. I'm going to do this A, B, C, and D at this time, this time. And I start off so strong because I'm focusing on the destination and I'm focusing on perfection.
Hmm.
And I'm not recognizing that in some way, if I'm more gentle with myself, then my intention will change and my set of values will change where I'm not looking for perfection. I'm focusing more on the journey and it becomes like such a
Yes.
gentle journey and it becomes so different. But in the beginning, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go hard. I'm going
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right. That's the competitive part, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
I think
Right.
it's good to some degree, but it's like, when you're so rough, when you're so harsh with yourself and you
Hmm.
forget to be mindfully gentle with yourself, you create this idea that you got to accomplish everything all at once and everything is urgent.
Hmm. I have found it's so funny. There was, just different news or whatever, but um, one saying that was said on some news thing, Sunday news, was no one's out there protesting incremental progress. But
Mm,
really, that is it. It is literally
incremental
the
progress.
key to most of this. It is
Yeah.
just incremental progress. It is just step bicep. I'm gonna bring up the prop again. I'm gonna bring up the rubber
Yep,
band,
I love
right?
it.
So there's a couple keys to this whole snapback thing, and
Yeah.
he names a lot, but one
Yes.
is self-image,
Right. Right. Right.
and so if I see it again, if here's our present day and we're making progress, what we need to do is really change our self-image. And as
Mhm.
we continue changing our self-image, it catches up to where we think we are, really, for our imagination and
Mhm.
rational thought. All
Right.
these things, as we continue to say, hey, I want to, this week I want to exercise 2 days a week, right? Instead of, hey, going hard, I want to exercise 5 days a week. I want to
Right.
exercise. I'm gonna work out for
Mhm.
2 hours 5 times a week. That's not,
Yeah.
if you're going from zero, hard to go to the hero, right? So
Right. Right. Right.
let's just do little incremental progress. Hey, I want to do 2 days a week. Okay. And then you start to do that,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And now there's not so much tension, right?
Right.
Okay, you know
Right.
what? Let me do 3 days
Mm.
and catch up.
Wow.
And so you have the least, you minimize the likelihood of
Yeah.
you snapping back to where you first started. Okay,
Wow.
so
That's a great way to put it.
if you try to stretch out, it wants to snap back real hard. But if you stretch out and then you fall a little bit, how much did you really fall back? Not much.
Right.
And so
Right.
this goes back to that incremental progress thing.
Wow. Yeah. 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 That makes a lot of sense. That does,
Yeah.
because it helps to, like you said, it helps to have a great flow. And along with that incremental progress, the mindfulness practices that you mentioned, journaling
Right.
journaling the journey. And
Right.
oh, that's the title, journaling the journey.
Journaling the journey. Love it. There you go. I love it. Yes.
I love it. That
Yes.
so journaling the journey, and because it's so important that we recognize all the, like you said, celebrating the wins. But how can you celebrate the wins if you're not even aware of what the win is? Because it's hard to celebrate small wins if you're not aware and conscious of it. And
Mhm.
there's so many small wins. Even in the field that I'm in therapy, especially with children, it's so easy to not be mindful about those small wins when it comes to children, because if they're struggling with behavioral challenges, it's easy to see the big bad choices that they're making
Right.
in those behavioral challenges.
Right.
But it's so difficult to pay attention to if a child has a problem with hitting. It's really easy to miss that they didn't hit that hard the last time.
Right. Right.
So even though, some people don't really agree with gentle parenting and all that, but it really works when you nurture those small wins, because now that child is getting attention from those small wins or from the positives. They're not getting attention from all the big negative behavioral challenges.
And here's the thing. We don't do that to ourselves enough. We
Right.
don't celebrate the wins. We don't acknowledge our own personal wins because we're not journaling. We're not.
Yeah.
It's hard to change what you don't measure, right?
Mm,
So
love
that's the
that.
thing about journaling, putting things down. You are putting a line in the sand and say, hey, this is what happened at this time. This is how I felt. This is what took place as I recall in the moment. And then when you
Right.
look back and say, hey, you know what? There's been improvement since then. And now
Absolutely.
you celebrate the win, you acknowledge, and you start to change your own self-image of yourself, because that's another component. We also have to change our self-image. We, put ourselves down. Oh, you know what? I wanted to lose, 5 pounds.
Yeah.
I didn't lose that 5 pounds. Well, you know what? You didn't lose that 5 pounds, but at least you stuck out and you continued to do some exercise for 5 minutes.
I love that.
Whatever the case may be. There's so many of these little incremental things that add up tremendously. I call them compounding. So,
Awesome.
you talk about, from a financial perspective,
Hmm.
we need to compound on ourselves. We need to continue to try to invest into ourselves
Hmm.
from a self-image perspective, from a relaxation perspective, yoga, as you mentioned,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
uh, have rational thought, about, pausing, reaction, all these components, positive thoughts about, what took place. If something took place, celebrate those wins. And as we
Wow.
continue to do that, then we start to change our self-imaging, and then they start compounding. It's then the snowball effect really starts to take place. And it's then there's no stopping. You
I
just have
love
to.
that. It's hard to change what you don't measure. I'm quoting
Hard to
you.
change, but you
But
don't measure. That's just no question about
next
it.
Facebook post, yes, I love it. Next Facebook post, that is, you said that, Mr. Chris Jackson said that.
There you go.
That's so meaningful, because, like you said, like, for an example, if you're on your journey of losing weight or getting healthier, and you find yourself not losing what you want, you sometimes have to, like you said, not only with compounding, but you reassess your values when you write down things, because it may not just be about the weight. Getting healthier also encompasses, how does your skin look, right?
Right.
What does your breath smell like? Like, what's going on with your heart rate? So if you reassess your values and you go back to, I'm measuring my progress. Maybe the weight hasn't gone down like I wanted to, but then I see changes over here. So if I reassess those values, it's not about the weight all the time. A lot of times it's about what's going on inside. So that's amazing.
Absolutely. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
That is wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I
I think another component to all of this is our desires, right? So I think if we can have a desire to have a commitment to, and this is a new kind of thing that I'm tapping into, is I don't want to disappoint my future self. So I don't want to be in the future and reflect on my present self now and say, you could have done more.
Wow.
You could have done better. You had it within you. You just didn't feel like it.
Yeah. Wow.
So, I think desire to, want to be mindful, to be present, the commitment to yourself to do that and stick with it. You have to try to find something.
Absolutely.
For me personally, I have tried to say, hey, I want to commit because of someone else. I want to commit, because of, my son, my daughter, my wife, whatever the case may be,
right?
Because of my job. But I have failed at those things. I have, and this is acknowledgement, I failed at those things. I've lost steam and motivation. But I found that if I tie them back to myself and say, hey, you know what? I know I am committed to myself. I want to make sure that if I reflect back and say, hey, did I do everything that I possibly can for them?
Well,
now it's a commitment to myself. I've tied it back to myself, my internal being, and say, hey, you can persist through these challenges.
Absolutely. Wow. I love that. I love that. That also it ties back to what you were saying, being honest with yourself, that accountability as well. I noticed that years ago, I would say, like, there were things that I wanted to do. I would wait for inspiration and motivation, thinking that is supposed to drive me to actually do the work. And I remember, like, looking back on my past self, that was, something that I thought was the right thing to do. And so now, like, thinking about not disappointing my future self, doing things for me, I do it backwards now. Well, I guess it's the way it's supposed to be, where I do the work, I actually do, and then I get the inspiration and motivation somewhere in the journey. Eventually I get
right.
It comes. It really does come. But then you actually have to move first. Right. And I think I was sold I don't know who sold it to me, but I was sold some lie where it was like, you get the inspiration first and then you move. No, it's the opposite. So I think that being honest with yourself, and like you said, thinking about your future self, not wanting to disappoint that part of yourself, knowing that there's some productivity, accountability there, being
Right.
mindful about that. So no,
Right.
that's awesome.
It
That's amazing.
in that journey, it's not easy. Right. So
Right.
it's a tough journey. There's going to be challenges. Reminds me of a story. I was I thought I was doing the right thing. I was working hard. I was trying to pursue. I worked at a company, great company. I went for another position. I was there for about in that new position for roughly about 9 months.
Wow.
My wife and I, we went on vacation. I came back and I found out, and I took that extra Monday off. That's just one thing. I take a vacation, you come back the weekend and you're like, do I really want to get back at it on
Yeah.
Monday? No, I just take that Monday off and I go
Right.
back Tuesday. So it helped a
Right.
little bit. So I went back Tuesday, found out that they laid off hundreds of people
Wow.
on Monday.
Oh my goodness.
And so as my coworkers are telling me this, I'm looking around and they're telling me the story that they just brought everybody in, and they went and laid everybody off, and it was scary, and no one knew what was going on.
Wow.
And then my phone rang, and I got called in, and it was a tough thing. It was interesting for me on how I reacted, because my reaction was very calm. And because I had to think and dig deep within myself. Well, what does this job define who I am? And the answer was no.
Wow.
I realized I found a lot of comfort in saying, hey, you know what? It's okay. Everybody else, HR, directors, whatever, they're tearing up. Like, we don't want to let you go, but since you just moved to this department and, you're the first, last one in, first one out type
Right.
thing, we had no choice. They literally couldn't do anything about it. And I said, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. And they said, I know. I know you'll be fine, but we don't want to lose you.
Right.
Said,
Right.
it is what it is. But I looked at that as a situation, and then within a month, literally a job opportunity fell in my lap. And it went very smoothly, and everything has been really smooth and easy going. Hard work, but I was able to pick up another job within a short time, and it was interesting because my wife, actually at the time, my wife was my fiance at the moment, and so we literally just booked our location of where we were going to get married.
Yeah.
Maybe a month prior, 2 months prior.
Oh my goodness.
And then this happened. And so, there was a lot of questions, like what was going to happen.
Right.
And so, in that aspect, I look at myself as being very lucky. I look at situations. I've been very fortunate, very lucky. But I've worked real hard. There's no question about it. I worked real hard for things. And it's funny, a saying that we like to say at the Opportunity League is luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
I love that. Wow. All these great sayings. Okay. They deserve to be on t-shirts or in the books. But no, that's amazing. You had enough self-awareness to respond mindfully. Like it's like you trusted the process. Like this is, you just trusted the process.
Right. A lot of belief in myself, and I didn't realize that I had that. I really didn't. At that moment, I didn't realize it was nerve-wracking to apply for another job outside of your original department. It's always. Absolutely. And so you always test yourself, how do you respond to that? And so, again, trying to be mindful, I always have to think back and reflect and say, how do I feel about this? And I went into it thinking, hey, this is to move incremental progress, that compounding towards a better future. And interesting enough, I found that reflection, having positive thoughts, and there's always good in everything. In that moment, it's everyone questioned, hey, that was not a good situation, but clearly I look
Right.
back 15 years later and say, yes, it was a good situation. It has opened up a whole nother world of
So
opportunity
many
that
doors.
I would have been
Wow.
never experienced.
Wow. And like you said, celebrating those wins, even celebrating how you responded. Like when you get,
Right.
because life throws these things at us, right? And life is going to continue to do that. But when you look back on how you responded to that situation where you're about to be newlyweds and you have all this stuff planned and you can look back and say, you know, I trusted the process then. I can
Right.
still trust the process now.
Why deviate from that?
Why deviate? Right. It
Right.
worked last time. Why not continue
Mhm.
working now? That's amazing. I think I would have lost it, but I think because this mindful journey, even as a therapist, it's still in the, I would say it went from to the beginning. Now I'm like in the intermediate level, and just being honest about where I'm at. What are your triggers? What are you, like we were talking about earlier? What are your values? What do you value? And do your values align with who you are? Are we letting other things define us? Like you didn't let your job define you.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
and so internally you know who you are. And once you know who you are and you come to truth with that, it's easy to say, you know what, it's going to be okay.
And I didn't even know who I really was then.
Yeah.
But I was on the journey. I acknowledged that I had a lot of work to do
Wow. Yeah.
and prior to that moment.
Right.
And I
Right.
realized, you know what, the only way I started and it really started back to I mentioned before about my communication journey, acknowledging and realizing how poor my communication really was.
Mm,
And when I did that, I had to dig deep and say, you know
absolutely.
what, you really need to work on this.
Wow.
Your verbal, your written communication is horrific, and
Right.
you really need to work on this. But for me to get to that point of
Yeah.
really looking in the mirror, as Michael Jackson say, the man in the mirror,
Man in the mirror.
and
Right. Right.
say, yeah, you need to
Wow.
work on this. I really had to do that. And that was literally the stepping stone of really having the courage
Yeah.
to do that
Wow. The intention. I mean,
and the
being
intention.
intentional. Wow.
There's no
That,
question.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's a grounding technique that I usually do with my clients. And it involves like getting in touch with your senses, your sense of sight, taste, touch, and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And that will be in the show notes. Basically, it's called the grounding technique. You can name 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, 3 things you feel, 2 things you smell, and 1 thing you taste. And you
Mhm.
kind of get into the practice of doing that. That's how I started my mindfulness journey. I would tell my clients to do that. I wasn't doing it. And I was like, oh, let me try it since I'm telling everybody else to do it. Right. Like, why not? And it
Right?
just it grounds you into the here and now.
Mm.
And it helps you to focus on breathing. Because I think that a lot of times we're not even breathing correctly. A lot of us aren't.
For
Right. And
sure.
we're supposed to be breathing from our diaphragm. I mentioned in the earlier episode that breathing from our diaphragm came naturally as babies once we're born. And then as adults, we just kind of lose that. And
Mhm.
so focusing on that breath is so important so that you can, it really puts you in the space of recognizing how you're breathing, and what's around you. So definitely doing that on top of everything else that you mentioned, the distractions, eliminating them, creating routine and all that. And I'll put all those things in the show notes as well. The grounding technique and what you mentioned, and definitely journaling. And I didn't know that there was an audio journal that we could do that, with audio. I thought,
Yeah, yeah.
you just have to.
Back in the day, I had a tape recorder,
Oh, nice,
and
nice.
so again, kind of the phrase is "meet you where you are." I didn't. That wasn't back then, but
Right, right,
um, I realized like, hey, look, I couldn't get my thoughts down, writing
right,
them down fast
right,
enough.
right,
Phones were not where they are now, right?
right,
So
right.
I went out and got like a tape recorder, the old school, the little tapes, and
Mm-hmm,
I got
mm-hmm.
one of those just so that as my thoughts came about, I was able to just hit record. and I
Oh,
can go
wow.
back. Eventually, I was able to get one that was just digital and so forth. But I found that part of my journaling and just and
Right.
my thoughts as they came through, I was able to now reflect on that. And
Nice.
then I realized, hey, you know what? I could write things down. I could start typing things up. I'm
Right.
IT, so I'm digital. So I do everything digital now. But
Right.
I type things up. And so
Awesome.
that was a big key component. And I love what you just said about breathing. Me being in sports and athlete, and now as I get older, I try to go for a jog, and I found that I was completely off as far as how I breathe.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
just huffing and puffing and huffing and puffing.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
no rhythm to it.
Wow. I
And
didn't
now
even know it was like a technique and how you do it, and it is.
right,
It's a technique, and it really helps to get rid of toxins. So when people do practice yoga and those types of stretching and that type of breathing, it
yes,
does help to get rid of toxins, and it helps to create that space in your brain to think clearly. If you think about when you're angry or mad, the first thing we do is stop breathing. We're like, oh, we breathe less.
breathe less. You should be doing the other way.
Right,
Breathe
right.
more. I mean, how do they always say? Okay, just breathe, just breathe. There's a reason for it.
It's a reason for it.
It
I used to
really
hate
does
that.
help.
I
Yeah,
one
I tell
one
my kids that
trigger
all
is
the
like
time. Breathe,
right. It's
just
like one
breathe.
trigger is like calm down. Like, no, I don't want to calm down, but that's what we should
Right.
be doing. The other trigger is like breathe. Like, no, I don't want to breathe because if I breathe, I'm going to bring sense to myself, and I don't want to have sense right now.
I don't want to have sense. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to tell you now.
Right, right. So it does create that sense. It creates that opportunity to start over.
Right. Right.
But yeah, yeah, that breathing, and then also you mentioned visualization. I think, and I call it sometimes
Imagination and
with kids,
visualization. Yep.
safe space of visualization. With children, I do it where I have them imagine a place, or it can be an imaginary place, or their home, and they kind of do that grounding technique in that imaginary place as if they were there. So that visualization is so important, being able to do that, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. But those are all some great ways to stay mindful and be in the present, for children and adults alike. I think that even if adults get into that childlike, that beginner stage of mindfulness, doing it the childlike way of imagining yourself somewhere else, and creating that safe space for yourself, it does work. It does work.
It really
So
does. It really does.
absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. But yeah,
Yeah.
these are awesome, some great ones. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll leave it on these extra tips, right? So as far as how do we make it a habit,
Yeah.
right? Incorporate it into our lives. So something that I have done, it's worked for me.
Mhm.
It's helped work for others, is put a reminder on our phone.
Yes.
So reminder on a phone, and it could be whatever is helpful. If it's just a reminder of saying, hey, be present minded,
I love
or
that.
any type of phrase, quotes. I'm found my wife has, got me hooked into quotes. And so I'm making quotes, I'm looking at quotes, and it has helped me to be present, because it
Yes.
forces me into the idea of making sure that I read this quote, reflect on it. What does it mean? What is it telling me? What is
Mm.
it, even drinking tea, you get the little messages, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
those type of things.
yeah.
Another thing is if you have to go into a computer, your password, even your password could be something that is what you're trying to aspire
I
for,
love
a
that.
goal that you
Wow.
do, that you're trying to accomplish
I
in
love
this year.
that. Yeah.
That you just make it into a habit. It is forcing you, the subconscious, to hear it, see it, feel it, do it every single time you go. Either you get that alarm
I love
or
that.
you type that password.
Wow. That's a great one. I love that, because how many passwords do we have throughout the day?
Too many,
I love
right?
that. Yeah.
So
And to be reminded of your journey, or to be reminded to be reflective. I love that. That's a great
yeah,
tip.
yeah,
That is a great tip. A journal question. Sometimes I'll give homework for those who want to. But one of the journal prompts that I would say, I would have everyone do, are you mindful or is your mind full? Right. And that's a journal prompt that I would love for everybody to be able to just reflect on. Are you mindful or is your mind full? Because I think once we get to the point of we practice some of the things that you were talking about, grounding techniques, all these things, take it one step at a time. Like you said, incremental, what did we say?
Incremental progress.
Incremental progress, focusing on those small steps, incremental progress, taking one thing that we said today and trying it for like the rest of the week. Once you master that, then try something else, so that your mind can be less full of just things of the past and the future, and we can focus on the here and now. But just, think about that. Reflect on, are you mindful or is your mind full of stuff? And that will help you be honest with yourself about where you are and with the journey in which you need to take to become more mindful and to practice mindfulness. Absolutely. No, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I always try to keep it at 25 minutes, but when we have some good content,
I try not to be long-winded, but
you're great.
Some of these things, there's a lot of stuff that can be helpful. And if anyone takes a couple of these, these tips or these steps, and you find them to be something that works for your journey, then great. So be it. I love it. This has been phenomenal. I really appreciate
Thank you.
The time here. This has been great.
Thank you. You've been awesome. I appreciate it. Awesome. So let's go into prayer to close out. Father God, thank you so much for Mr. Chris Jackson. He's been phenomenal on this live. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for directing our conversation. Father God, thank you for being able to give us some tips that we can give everybody else about staying mindful and being mindful in the present, in the here and now, so that we can better serve you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much. And definitely, I'm going to be doing some more stuff. I'm excited that we're near the end, but I have some more things in the works, and I'll be letting you know. I'll be calling you.
Yeah, sure.
I truly appreciate your wisdom. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Not a problem. This is great.
Thank you so much.
It's great. I'm sure your listeners have appreciated the effort and the energy that you put into this over these past, soon to be 40 days of these episodes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day, and everybody out there, may God keep you and bless you. And I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.